Hey guys, this is Kthulu here. I've been getting a lot of requests and questions about viable PvP specs for Frost Death Knight. So I thought I'd take a moment to, instead of just going over it repeatedly, individually, over and over and over, into just, making this video for, well, semantics, I guess. Anyway, well, the basic, your basic for gear, the best part you want to start with is mastery is your priority attribute. Your second priority attribute is hit rating. You want to stay right at the 5% cap. I'm a little over, but that's the closest I can get with the reforges. And then after that, haste. It's arguable. A lot of people will say crit or haste is your second or your third most viable stat, but I would say haste just because it helps with the rune regeneration, especially if you go into Unholy Presence. Some Frost DKs prefer Blood Presence just for the extra damage mitigation, but I would say in like 2s, if you don't have a healer at your back, or if you're in Battlegrounds and you don't have a pocket healer, it is definitely the better way to go, especially if you spec into Bladed Armor, because it will actually raise your attack power. But if not, Unholy is definitely the way to go. Faster runes, faster attack speed, which means faster killing machine procs, which means more overall damage in a shorter amount of time. And it also means you move faster, so, for those pesky mages with blazing speed procs, it'll work. Anyway, the basic rotation is simple. Maintain diseases. Then you pretty much just alternate between, in PvE, Frost, or Obliterates and Frost Strikes. Now in PvP, you kind of want to keep your Necros going as much as you can. But, and then you just kind of alternate to get a runic empowerment. Now, in PvP, it's very, 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 very important that you remember that you do not obliterate in a PvP situation unless your killing machine proc is up. And the reason why is because you're committing 2 runes to DPS when you could only commit 1. I would say Necrotic Strike is more viable because it lays down Desecration, which means your target isn't going to move as fast if you have that spec'd. And overall, it just helps because there's a lot of classes nowadays in Cataclysm that heal, like Warriors, Mages. Well, mages don't really heal that much. Druids are definitely important in Necrotic Strike on. The rest is, I don't really have to get into details. You can all kind of figure it out for yourself. But anyway, that's just the general rotation. Now let's get into talents. For the first tier, pretty basic. If you're not going two-handed or one-handed Frost, Runic Power Mastery and Icy Reach are probably the only way to go. You don't even need Nurse Cold Steel, because it's completely fucking useless for two-handed Frost. After that, the second tier is pretty straightforward. Annihilation, of course. Lichborn is a must. It's non-negotiable for PvP. You have to have it. In PvP, spec it in raid, like for a raid spec, because generally you don't need to worry about Lichborn healing yourself unless you have really bad healers, which is not the case usually. On Pale Horse, now 7 Death Knights don't actually prefer to spec into this. They prefer to take that 2 and pour it into Rime, but I don't actually agree with that, because that's assuming that you have a 45% chance with 3 into Rime that when you obliterate you get a free Howling Blast. Well, like I said, if you're not spamming obliterate, without it, there's no point. And it's a 45% chance. It's just, I don't see how it's viable compared to the reduction of 30% CC and the overall mounted speed increase. Mounted speed increase doesn't really matter, but the reduction of the CC duration is epic. An Endless Winter, it's a must. Frost Death Knights and two-handed Frost Spec, they generate a lot of runic power, but you don't want to have to commit 10 runic power if you don't have it after you've listed Lichborn healer, you've torrented down your runic power from Frost Striking. If you're short for that kick, that can be the difference between a win and a loss in like a TSG comp, 3s, 2s, or just a Battleground in general. Alright, Killing Machine proc. This is an absolute must. You cannot not have the skill. Chill to the Grave, also very, very, very important. Now, Merciless Combat. It's not like a must, but I prefer it because, generally when I get a target down lower than 35%, I'm obliterating, because, there's a good chance you're going to 2 to 3 shot them in that. Pillar of Frost is a definite must. It's part of your burst. Improved Icy Talons, definitely, because it augments Killing Machine. And Brittle Bones, of course. It just augments everything you have. Now, Improved Frost Presence doesn't really have a practical usage in PvP, because it's only 4% extra damage. while you're in Frost Presence, and you only retain 4% runic power generation from, you know, whenever you're not in other presence. Now, you never really, I mean, some Death Knights like Frost Presence. I don't see how it's viable. Just a moment, I gotta tell here. Oh, it's some guild invite crap. Anyway, so I wouldn't use it. I just don't see how it's viable in a PvP situation. Hunger and Cold, definite must. It's single-handedly your greatest CC as a Frost Death Knight, because you can force trinkets with it. Chill of Blades, also important, and I'll explain to you why. Now, Chill of Blades by itself, you know, it's great, but to make it really, really work, you definitely need this right here, Glyph of Howling Blast, because it'll put Frost Fever on your targets, and Howling Blast happens to be one of your hardest hitting abilities for Frost Death Knight, so you definitely want that there. Otherwise, you know, basically, this is the decision part right here. If you're going 2 one-handed Frost, you wouldn't spec into this. You'd take these 2 and port to there, and you could take 1 point out of, well, I wouldn't take 1 point out of anything, really. But, I mean, you could take those 2 and put it into that, and then this is where you decide. You can get this or this. I would go, if you're going 2-handed Frost, this is definitely a must. And then Howling Blast, of course. Now, for splash talents, some Death Knights will go, they'll go 3 into Bladed Armor, 2 into Blade Barrier, 2 into Blood Tap, and 2 into Hand of Doom. Now, that's good for a BG spec, but I mean, an extra silence or a minute off silence and 30 seconds off your Blood Tap, yeah, it's nice, but in like 3s or 2s, it's not really viable. Unholy Command is definitely one of my favorite talents, just because every time I get an honorable kill, or you get something that kills experience, like say you kill a Priest Shadowy Apparition or a Mirror Image, it'll reset the cooldown of your Death Grip, which is really, 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 really useful. Now, this is where you can choose if you're going into the Unholy branch. You can go Epidemic, which means your diseases will last about 12 seconds longer when you go 3-3 into it. Or you can go Virulence, which will increase your disease damage. I personally prefer Virulence just because I'm kind of a DPS freak and I'm not lazy enough where I can't maintain my diseases. A well-placed Festering Strike can reapply them if you don't want to commit the Unholy rune. Otherwise, you know, because you want to use a Necrotic Strike or something. I mean, otherwise, I just don't see how Epidemic could be greater than Virulence, in my personal opinion. Now, Desecration. If you're gonna go 5 into the first tier of Unholy, this is the only place you spend your last 2. Is this right here. It is the most important skill for a Frost DK in an arena situation, or even sometimes in a rated battleground situation. It is the most important splash talent you have. After that, the Blood Tree, if you go into the Unholy Tree like that, your last 3 talents can be put into Blade Barrier or Bladed Armor. Now for like Battlegrounds or General World PvP, I would go Blade Barrier, because it gives you a little more of a defensive build. But if you have a healer at your back and you're working on an arena spec, you want Bladed Armor, just because, you know, that extra attack value you have. I mean, other than that, yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. For enchants, I go Mastery on boots, you know, the AP, extra socket, blah, blah, blah. Crit, I would get the 50 strength, but I actually don't have enough gold for it right now. I just made this character about 2 weeks ago on the server. But for gems, I would say 20 strength, 20 resilience gems, 40 strength, and then Spell Pen. Now, a lot of Death Knights ask me, why do I use Spell Pen? Spell Pen in blue sockets is probably the most important part for a Death Knight if you're Unholy or Frost Spec. If you're Blood Spec, it's completely useless, because your diseases don't really generate any of your damage. It's all from Vengeance, Death Strikes, Hard Strikes, and Death Coils. So you don't really need a lot of that. Now, see here how I have 200 resistance to Shadow? I have about 220 Spell Pen. And that means when, you know, like a Paladin's blocked or a Priest has Shadow Protection up, that means I'm going to actually cut through that buff they have and do probably the normal amount of damage, which is very, 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 very important. Because if you ever go against a lock with Shadow Ward up, or a Priest with Shadow Protection, your diseases are not going to do shit for damage. And it sucks. It's really frustrating. And that's also why Spec Virulence and Augment with Spell Penetration. Other than that, I mean, that's pretty much just the gist of it, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment on the video down below, and feel free to subscribe. Thanks for watching.